Hi everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to Dialogue's Unarmed Verses, Documenting a Community. Charles Officer's award-winning documentary, Unarmed Verses, is an incredibly touching and sensitively executed portrait of a community, Toronto's Villaways Park, facing relocation. We welcome Officer, producer Lea Marin, and Director of Photography Mike McLaughlin to provide insight into some of the creative challenges they faced while making this film and how they overcame them. So I'd like to introduce our panelists, Charles Officer. Charles is a British-Canadian filmmaker who studied at Cambridge University and the Ontario College of Art and Design. He worked as a graphic designer and creative director in Toronto before attending the neighborhood Playhouse School of Theatre in New York. He was the recipient of Hot Doc's Don Haig Award of Merit in 2012 and went on to direct an episode of Engraved on a Nation, which won a 2014 Canadian Screen Award. Officer has also directed episodes of the acclaimed television series Rookie Blue, Saving Hope, and Private Eyes, and his films include the short hymn Silent War, his debut feature Nurse.Fighter.Boy, as well as his documentary debut Mighty Jerome, which won 4 Leo Awards and a Regional Emmy Award. Unarmed Verses is his latest documentary. Welcome, Charles. Thank you. Lea Marin is an award-winning Toronto-based producer with more than 18 years' experience in the film and television industry. A graduate of Canadian Film Centre's Producers Lab, Marin joined the National Film Board of Canada as a producer in 2006. She's worked on the award-winning films Unarmed Verses, Picture This, and her other credits include Astra Taylor's Examined Life, The Portrait, directed by Oscar-nominated filmmaker Hubert Davis, and My Prairie Home, which premiered at Sundance and was nominated for a Canadian Screen Award. Welcome, Lea. And Mike McLaughlin has worked as a cinematographer on numerous films, documentaries, and commercials over the past 10 years. In 2012, he received a Canadian Screen Award nomination for his cinematography on an episode of The Nature of Things. Other notable credits include Trevor Anderson's The Man That Got Away, winner of the DAAD Short Film Prize at the Berlinale, and Charles Officer's feature-length documentary, Unarmed Verses, which won Best Canadian Feature Documentary at Hot Docs. Welcome, Mike. And moderating today's conversation is my colleague, Bridget Tierney. Bridget is the manager of Youth and Community Initiatives at TIFF. A proud Montrealer, she's worked for TIFF since 2013, where she's interested in community collaboration, youth engagement, and film programming that's dynamic, innovative, political, and more reflective of the young people she gets to work with. She has a BA in International Relations and African Studies and a master's degree in Culture and Communications. Thank you for helping us out with this panel, Bridget.
Thank you for having me. That's so fun. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And thank you all for being here. I'm very excited to talk about a project that I love and feel close to. To kick things off, I'm wondering if you can just tell us very briefly, what is this film about for each of you?
I think this film for me is about agency. It's about voice. It's about the way that some of us who have not had certain opportunities, how they're overlooked in our society, and specifically, in the Black community, it's we have a lot of really incredibly young, talented people, and this is about them having space.
I mean, I think I'd echo that. I think when we first started talking about this film, we were very aware of the way members of this community are portrayed in the media, but very rarely do you get the opportunity to understand who they are. And both coming from a marginalized community, the Black community, we recognize that this is an opportunity to explore that and to demonstrate that for an audience. And I think in particular for us understanding what it can mean, as Charles said, to be invisible. And so we began there.
I would say that I think that it's about patience and pressure. Patience being people not having a voice, and if you listen enough, you'll be able to hear them. And pressure in that your community for 5 to 10 years has been told that it's going to be, abolished. And they always had that pressure growing up. So yeah, patience and pressure.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful. You all already kind of touched on it, and I think that's relevant to the theme we're talking about today, but I'm wondering if you can share a little bit with our audience why you felt compelled to tell this story. And I think it came up in your answers, but what really told you, like, this is a film I have to make. This is a story I need to tell.
I think when Lea and I first started talking about this project, there was other ideas floating around it, but we really wanted to centralize on the city that we both grew up in, and we hear a lot of things about what's happening in America and turning the lens there, and but I think we went in there with the intention to find out what was breaking the hearts of these young youth or this community from anyone under pretty much 25. That was a focus, and it wasn't really going to investigate anything from an expertise sort of outside perspective where these, it's like some scientist over in a lab looking down at these individuals. And it wasn't really about the parents so much either. And it was really about this sort of space of actually understanding when they're seeing images of youth that get, again, from the United States and right here, who are being executed in their communities. How do they react to that? How do they arm themselves? And the first thing they've got to do is kind of unarm, So it was a very important thing for us to find out what's breaking their hearts.
Yeah, I think I won't add too much more other than to say that Charles spent a lot of time in the community at the outset. And I think after we understood what was happening, particularly at Villaways, and realized the complexity of what these youth were going through. And there was a program that they're involved in. There was also what was happening with the revitalization. And I think understanding that there were so many issues that were coming together that really needed to be understood, I think that was when it was kind of like, okay, we have to tell this story. So I think we landed there. I don't think we knew we were there until we had the opportunity to meet this community in particular.
Okay. Mike's like,
And I just have to say real quickly that at the very inception of this project, I was in conversation with Bridget, and there was a workshop that sometimes I participate in out of Bell Lightbox, and I told her about this project and kind of the idea of where we want to explore, and she immediately said, "I know exactly the community," and I went up with her to this community, and they were showing PS.
a wonderful children's doc.
Wonderful children's doc, and it was amazing because I was there observing and just figuring out, okay, where I am, and I watched this community of kids and how they were looking after each other. I remember specifically when Francine walked in, too, and she had like I think a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old in her arms. And she was 11, and this community that was happening, how they were just functioning in this sort of way, and this film that I thought they'd say, this is like we're not going to connect with this. These are these like kids and whatever, and I'm watching how they got engaged by watching these other kids do things that I think that these kids didn't know they could do it, and then they end up at the Oscars, and I think that was something where to watch how they were watching something else. Was really, it was inspiring. It triggered things, so I thank Bridget because this film and finding this place, I don't think really would have happened.
Thank you for that. Community is kind of a special secret, which your film beautifully reveals. I'm wondering, before we get into this I want to get into the technicalities of building relationships and filming, especially in a vulnerable place like Villaways. But before we do that, just to flip the question a little bit, I'm wondering if there are stories that you've been passionate about, equally like invested in, but you really felt, this is not my story to tell. I want the story told, but I'm not in a position to tell it. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit, because I think the conversation can be reductive. I'm not sure if everyone's fully tuned in to how that dialogue's happening for people. And we know it's important to feel connected, but I think not the negative, but the decision not to tell a story. I'm wondering if that's come up for you at all as creative people and filmmakers.
I think it's a question that I'll take it away from the individual for now, but I think it's a question that comes up for us institutionally at the National Film Board of Canada. I think we get a lot of filmmakers that come to us with ideas and stories that they want to tell, and it is a question that I and all of my colleagues, we ask that question, and it's something that comes up a lot. So for me, I do ask the question right off the top, which is, why is this your story to tell? I don't think it's happened for me specifically with a project that I was invested in or thought I was going to develop, but it has happened with other projects that have come through to us where we have said, perhaps you're not the culturally appropriate person to make this film, right? So those conversations do happen, and I think it's important for us to reflect on that. I do personally think about that, and I have thought about it in relation to work that is not necessarily a doc or something that I've done at the NFB, but other dramatic work that people have asked me to consider. And so I think it's an important question that we should be asking ourselves.
I mean, the obvious thing being my skin color and, like traveling around the world shooting documentaries, there are times for sure where it's like, am I the best person for this role? And I'm the first one to bring that up. But I've worked with Charles for 5 or 6 years now, and I would trust that he would make that call early on before even bringing me on board. So by the time I'm hired, I'm just like, it's go time.
Right.
He's amazing. I mean, Francine fell in love with him. And there are times, and that's the intimacy, and that's, when you're making film, or I'm trying to, and I think that also feeds back to the question you originally asked, is just, you're casting and you're looking at the criteria of who and what you're bringing people together to do. And yeah, there's a casting involved in your cinematographer and how you believe they'll engage, and he has the right temperament and soul that would, come into a community like that and people fall in love with it. They won't just like, who's this white guy hanging out over here,
Well, I think I have to tell the Red Bull story. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, yes.
So we're filming with Francine one day, and I think Francine actually thought she was your mom by the end of everything. She was very maternal working with Mike. And so I think we were in the middle of shooting. I think we were taking a break. We were going to have lunch, and then you were drinking a Red Bull. And Francine was like, you drinking a Red Bull? He was like, yeah. He's like, that's not good for you. And she took it out of his hands and she dumped it in the garbage. So
it's funny because I don't really drink them that often. I just happened to have one that day, and she was like, no.
Yeah, but you were a bit embarrassed. I remember
was
that.
like, okay. She also took my phone at another time and switched the passcode in it. So her thumbprint worked, but mine didn't. I was like,
Oh my gosh, that's horrifying.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
but it's actually those little relationships that help when there's a 6'2" man hovering over with a camera. It's
and
like
this close to you.
Yeah, it's like all those little fun moments. Those are what allow for me to just silently sneak into a room while they're watching television and grab 7 shots.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, Bridget, there's no hard and fast rule, but I think asking yourself the question and understanding why you are playing a particular role in the creation of something is really important. And so whatever conclusion you come to, I think it's important that we start thinking about that in terms of asking ourselves those questions.
It's a criteria. I think it's like, you start making things, and some people start to, cast you in, like, you only get calls to do certain kinds of projects, but I think things come across, your way. Maybe you're developing Indigenous projects of your own that you're passionate about, that you already know that you're the right person to kind of execute that story to a degree. But it should be something that you should be critically looking at within yourself, and it happens. And unfortunately, at times, it's interesting when you tell somebody that, but they believe that you are the right person for it. Right. And so there's an interesting thing of like, well, that investment of understanding. I think it's key to how we actually move forward. And I suggest people, like, when there are moments where I don't feel that I'm right person to tell this thing, but I would offer a suggestion of who I think they can explore or reach out to possibly be the person.
Awesome, thank you. And we're going to get more into these wonderful short stories. I think to give everyone a sense of some of what we're going to be talking about going forward, we'll play the first 2 clips, so the TV clip and dinner clip. And then we can talk about how that happens.
We didn't really learn anything. The process was when we want a unit when we're moving out, if someone picks the same unit as us, the person with the lower number get the unit.
Well, what I didn't understand is like if you move, oh, you're going to come back here if you want to come back. They tell you yes, and then they don't give you that access if you want to come back.
They said that if you wanted to come back, that they'd get the moving trucks and they move you in, and then you also have what's it called, a legal right or whatever. When they give you the notice, if you move before then you will not be eligible to come back.
It's my me time. All the time is your me time. Well, I do love myself.
I just like to thank Luke for writing that beautiful song about me.
It wasn't about you.
Thanks for not telling Michelle the song was about her. Yeah, no problem.
Hello? Wait, I'm putting you on speaker, okay?
Where's Grandma?
Grandma's actually right here.
Okay, she okay?
You okay? She said yes.
Okay, my dear, take care.
Okay. Bye. God, thank you for my brothers and sisters and my family, and thank you for the meeting. I had a great time getting fed by your spiritual food, and please bless the food I'm about to eat now, and please bless my grandmother so that she may live to see tomorrow, and everyone here. Through your son, Jesus Christ, amen.
You don't feel later.
Let's have the mac or no?
You want some of that? Want some of that?
Yes, please. I have to put this back in there for later.
No, but it's here right there.
Grandma is 84. She took us all, and she's hard. Sometimes, she's soft. We all have recovered because of her. Grandma, you gonna eat?
I'm ready for it now.
No, you. Are you gonna eat?
No, I'm ready for it.
My grandmother adopted Ryan and Kenny, their brothers, and they both have autism. Kenny lives on his own now. Ryan's not going anywhere because that's his mom, and Grandma calls him her feet and her hands. Would you like water? Oh, Daddy, I forgot to tell you. We have this on Friday, and the grade 7s get to go here, and the grade 9s and the grade 8s. And that's the cost for the one I'm going to.
$45.
Expensive?
So you need $45.
Mm-hmm. And then they said that you have to come on Wednesday, February 10th, and give $10 deposit. So that, like they said, that if you pay your $10, then they know that you're committed. If you don't show your $10 and someone else wants to go to the same event as you and they pay their $10, then you get bumped out.
So you have to have a down payment
Mm-hmm.
to hold on the spot.
Okay, so $10 and then...
35 more.
And yeah, that's it.
Okay.
I said, don't come in there, you're drunk inside. I don't like it. You're drinking rum? Hey, you come out already. Go outside. Come in when you're drunk inside. I don't like it.
Kenny, sit down before you faint or throw up on somebody. Sit down. Sit. I said to sit. Stop looking at me like that. Sit down. What piece do you want?
5-part.
Okay. Do you want some salad?
No, yeah, so that I cover this.
Go.
Wait, don't put your hands in there.
You know you're stupid when you're drunk, right?
Wonderful. Yeah. So those scenes are quite early in the film, and they really set so much up politically, culturally, emotionally, from a family perspective. I'm wondering if we can get really specific here on how and why these moments are in the film. So the how, in terms of literally how you shoot these, and if you can add the sort of sensitivity lens that I'm imagining you both had, and I'm speaking to Charles and Mike on this, because I think people are kind of vague. They say, like, you build relationships and then you show up, and it's not always done in ways that are ethical or ways that really respect and support the communities you're representing. So first, the how, including that sort of social piece, and then the choices that you make when you're putting this film together to show audiences, and what was coming up. What were some of the questions you were asking yourselves at that point?
Man, you're good. I think the how is on a certain sort of space of trying to construct these films. You are imagining moments, and you can discuss them with the family and let them know the kind of things that you're looking for at times, without trying to direct and give too much detail. There's some synergy that happens also between Mike and I, that of what I'm looking at in the room and how we are conducting ourselves and capturing it. So, but the how's got to come from certain sort of questions that you have about the family that you want to try to find or uncover. And I think it's important how this family functions and being intimate with them in a certain way. One of my things that I noticed also with Francine was the influences of media and what she actually spends her time watching and listening to. And in that room, she controls a television. Her grandmother's watching this television show with these kids in them. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of them are DVD recordings that she records and then watches over. And so it also inspires the way that she thinks about herself. This is the media, this is stuff that she engages with. And it's innocently done. She does this. It led to another moment later on the film about self-image. And this is where young girls, boys, start to understand their relationship to this other world, this completely make-believe. So the how and sort of you have these feelings, but a lot of this stuff is also intuitive. You go there and you start to see things. And if you have an idea in your head of some things that you want to capture, then you try to articulate it, and then we move in a certain way. But I have seen a lot of films with white young kids sitting around doing nothing all day, and they get Oscar nominations. So in a way, this is also an experiment of I'm being honest, right? But it's okay, and I like some of these films, but I'm just saying that, how do people feel when you can just let a lens sit on someone of color in these communities and let you deal with them,
There's an interesting part in that first clip as well where they had just come back from a pretty big meeting and they were in the entranceway. Right. And we kept our distance from maybe 10 feet away. If you notice that there's always kind of a person in the foreground, it's both by cinematic choice, but also it puts me further away and I'm not in their conversation, but I can still grab everybody's angle. And then something like watching TV, I'm actually physically standing this close to her. And I definitely, a couple times she'd be like, "Why are you doing this?" And it's it's okay, it's gonna be cool, it's cool shots. And what that really is about is that later on when it's a bit more serious, TV's nothing. And then all of a sudden she's calling her mom later and she doesn't notice that I'm there.
You develop that sort of
language. So it's those little scenes, it's great that they're in there, but there was also a lot of them that didn't make the cut where we're just going through the whole thing and just keeping the camera rolling.
Yeah.
So you're capturing everything so that in the end you can make those choices in the edit.
Yeah.
But you've already been there.
Well, what's scary about a film like this is that at any moment she could do something that's extremely poetic. and do you know what I mean? Like the kids are everywhere, and it's just like you just have to always be listening. We got into a really good rhythm where Charles would like be a full shot ahead of me. He would be like, I would get into the position, and then he would trust me. He would look and see, yeah, that's kind of what I want. Go around the corner, and then I would just wait for him to make the call, and then he would go, and I would move the camera really fast. It was the fastest I've ever moved on a.
It was amazing.
It was like.
It was amazing. I was like, we're shooting this like a drama, you know, but we don't have any lighting setups to shift on.
Well, that's why
we don't have like 20 minutes between setups, so we're going to like move. And that was a rhythm. It was a challenge. But Mike is amazing. This guy was sweating, and like just you know, and amazing. But it was. But I was moving too. Like we were just dancing through these spaces of looking, of seeking, of constantly not just relying upon, oh, we'll just like wait what happens as well. We're going to actually move and see how we were going to inspire and see what something might happen when we move, change the position. Anyway, so because they can feel us in the room, right?
I'll also add that these are tiny, like
tiny
these houses are
spaces.
built that no room is bigger than like should fit 3 people.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating.
Yes.
On a different level.
And that was very intimate because our sound would be all set up and everyone would be Mike. He'd be sitting way out, like out front, like talking with the dad or just sitting out front of the building, outside or in the car or like in the front foyer while it's just kind of me and Mike, like moving through these spaces times.
I want to keep going forever, but I also think we should.
I know, and I'm really afraid that I'm not really answering the questions properly.
I think you are. I just have one sort of follow-up, which is the generation gap. So even if Francine's an artist, she understands, like from the beginning, you know, you open with art. She's an artist. What about the grandmother or the father or the brothers? Like, how did you shift the conversation when you were speaking to different people who might have completely different cultural lenses in terms of, like, why are you filming me eating dinner? Literally, why?
Oh.
Charles is like, yeah, why?
Lea, you answer that one. No, I mean, again, like, you know, in this process of making this film, we did actually sit-down conversations with Dad, Francine, before we moved into the house. You have to gain trust as you go along the way. And I think that was very important for us to do. And, you know, in the process of making the film, also we realized I knew that, you know, in certain shooting days that we didn't get as close as we needed to. But it kind of took that time to build a relationship with the family before you can get into this young girl's room with a camera. But, you know, when I spoke with her grandmother, Katura, and Alva, her father, like, I would tell them that I want to film a scene with you guys having dinner. I want to understand what that dynamic is between you all doing that. And we're going to be natural. We're going to, like, you know, whatever you cook, it's like, I just really want to see how that dynamic works, you know? And then they agreed. And then we showed up, and then we looked for it in those moments. And those sort of things, we had no idea she was going to jump up and pick up that form and talk about this trip and to do this negotiation with her dad. And it was like, and it was amazing because, again, when that scene, it's like it's showing this, she wants this thing. And this guy's talking about $45. Okay. Like, I'm sure a lot of y'all like, oh, Mom, Dad, like, you know, this thing is costs like $100 for the skiing trip. Yeah, no problem. Here's a check, right? Like, it didn't happen. He's still trying to negotiate, like, and tell her in a certain way. That's a lot of money. And she acknowledges it too. So those sort of things just kind of happen and which were magic for us.
But I think it also stems to what you were saying, and I think what you've just touched on, which is comfort and trust. Because to be honest, Katura, Grandma was not going to be in the film at the very outset.
Right.
She said, absolutely not. She gave permission and we could come in because it's her house and film in the house, but she was not going to be on camera. And then, of course, she has a presence in the film now. And we see her as a character. But I think that's important, as between the two of them, they built both that space of comfort and trust. You know, not only in this household, but with the community.
We're going to roll the last clip to touch on this last point, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So, Try, I think is the clip.
If that's your rationale, okay, if that's your reason as to why you don't want to do it because you're afraid of letting people down, you not doing it is letting people down.
Yeah, but like if you don't do something, you can't fail at it.
Who told you that? You not trying it at all is failing at it.
No,
You didn't even
not.
give you a chance to experience. You didn't give yourself a chance to experience anything, to even know if
I
that's the
got
way
to
to do it.
experience something.
What did you get to experience?
I got to see him record, and I got to see the process.
But what about yourself? If you don't do it, you won't have anything. Right now is an opportunity that we don't know if we will ever get again. You have a great opportunity now, and when you're faced with things like that, you got to take it, because you don't know when it will come back your way again.
But this is the thing. What if it doesn't go good? Like if you don't try.
If I
you
did
can't
it,
fail.
but the thing is, I would never know, right? If I said no to the opportunity and didn't do it, I would never know what to expect.
Just give me one. Just give me a cheese.
You have 2 weeks to decide if you want to do something or not.
Me, dude, I'm not believing it.
Don't let it pass you by. See everybody, look. They're trying. They've never been in the booth before, but they're trying. Try.
So you mentioned right off the top that Francine really woke something in this story. And I think what I found so profound about it, and when it opened at Hot Docs, there were a couple parallel films that we were watching, that, thinking about this movie. And you really, as an audience, like, are feeling with Francine. Like, you're not watching or feeling about her or for her. Like, you're really in it with her. So I'm wondering, like, cinematically and technically, how you build that sort of empathic lens for your audience, so that it's not like, you know, this outside-inside perspective, but you use Francine as this vessel to be political, to be emotional. How did that happen?
She appeared. Like, the kid is... There's a lot of Francines out there. So there was a workshop we did at the National Film Board, a little animation workshop, and the kids were broken up into groups. And I've told this story before, but when they were broken up to groups and Francine was leading her group, she just was so immersed in what she was doing. She had the kind of public solitude that you kind of wish for with, like, professional actors, you know? She had a sensitivity and things about her where, when I was listening to her, I thought she actually had a learning disability, because she was so quiet, and her words and the way they were coming out. But then when you heard them, it was like you're talking to a person from another planet, because she was so intuitive and wise, and she had a lot of soul in her. So,
yeah. I mean, I think I would say exactly that. We didn't use her, right? I think she emerged, and I think it became clear as we were filming this community that Francine was that light that we were watching transform before our eyes. And I think we had, you know, things changed as they do, as you film, as you make a film. And I think for us at one point, you know, we had different ideas about who we would speak to in this community, and we were at one point prepared to give everyone a voice. But then we'd have conversations about the fact that this needed to be told from only the perspectives of the youth, even though we may film adults in certain situations that are part of that community, and to allow Francine's voice to rise, which is why I think you are with her. It's because it's Francine's voice that actually carries the story. And we follow her, right? We are actually with her as she's experiencing what we watch her experience. So I think that's great that is the response to the film, because I think that's all you can ever hope for. But I do think she was this light that truly did, as Charles has indicated, emerge for us. And we were all just as, I think, taken with this incredible human being who had such poise and intelligence and wisdom at such a very young age.
And Anita Lee, and it was Lea. in the editing process, because even with the title came pretty early, and the idea of like all these multiple young voices hearing, and the film was we had a lot of other things, right, Mike? Like that we had some of the young ones interviewing the young ones, and these interesting sort of things happening, and it was Anita Lee and Lea Marin who basically saw what we were doing in the editing suite and basically said, put everything away. Follow this person. If she did whatever she touches, you can't go to anything unless she touches it. And that was kind of the biggest breakthrough in our editing process, where we were able to kind of let go of some things, some beautiful things, but like it allowed us to actually focus in on how she was feeling, because she would give it. It's like, how does an actor kind of, emote something, or how you feel that? Sure, you've got to be looking for it and know where to put the lens and everything, but you can point the lens almost anywhere. And you either have to have it happening, and we recognize that they, Anita and Lea really recognized that she had something that we should really be focusing on. I was worried because she was so shy, and how close you can get to somebody. And you're not here to muscle some youth and get me, you gotta do this. When I walked in that community, the first time when I went in to actually talk about possibly making the film, they were like, so when are you leaving? Because that's what they're used to. People coming and going, empty promises. I was told once, and I told Lea this, that this young man who was in the film, he said, Charles, you know what I like? You know why? Because you don't make promises. It was heartbreaking to hear that, because that's what they think a promise represents, nothing. So, but I also said to them, like, what if I don't like you? What if I don't want to, spend a week here and then I don't want to make a movie with you? What if that's the situation? So we have to find out if we like each other, if we want first, and if we can kind of engage that way, and then we can kind of roll into making a film. But I tell you, the idea was big, and we had to bring it all kind of down, streamline it.
I think you captured two amazing things there, which is like letting people choose letting them have agency in building a relationship with you. It's not just you building a relationship with them. And also, I think we understand even the concept of this panel is like, how do you enter a community? It's like, well, actually, how do you look for somebody who's going to guide you through their world? It's such a different approach, right? And it definitely echoes in the film. So you did it. Did you have any perspective, like from a cinematographer's perspective, like, because you build that intimacy with Francine too, like there's so many shots that are so close to her face. Was that also part of a similar motif? And
yeah, definitely. Like we tried many different things. We were like interviews. We had more setup type environments, but eventually we just got into a strategy of if they move, I'll follow. It's 95% single camera. So a big part of that is our editor, Andreas Landau. Because I watch it still, and I'm like, there must have been 2 cameras that day. I even just asked him outside. He's like, no, there wasn't. There was like only on the recording studio days, and maybe one other. So it's, he's a huge part of that process, just getting feedback from both of them. But yeah, once we, like the climax of the film, I won't say what it is, but it stresses me out to watch it. Because it's like, it was just rolling. We filmed probably for like 2 hours straight while this whole thing was going on. And it just, it's like, it's very special, but it's nerve-wracking because there's no redos, there's no takes or anything. We eventually narrowed down our strategy based on the conversations and the edits. And then at that point, it was like, just roll. And from the moment we get there till it's dark.
Till the sun goes down.
Yeah.
Okay, I know I keep threatening to open it to the audience, and I will, and there is time. But you spoke to something that I think really matters too. We've talked a little bit about how we get in there and who we meet and what we do. How do you leave?
You don't. You don't leave, and that's kind of the hard thing about this kind of work too, is that you start building the community because you have this intention and things. And that's the hard thing about making films too. It's like you move on to a new project. You start building new families, new communities, and hopefully, it could be a whole other thing. It could be doing some other dinosaurs next. No, but I think but the beautiful thing is that you can't just go in these places. You can't go and just take. We still have relationships with these youth. We're helping them move forward with some of their personal projects. It's, you can't help everyone individually, but I really believe, I've been learning that, if you can focus on a couple of individuals and they sprinkle that off, it's like, it's, even Francine learned that. She already had it in her, but she's already looking after the next generation, So so that's kind of the thing that's been happening. I don't know. You don't leave these things. These things stay with you.
No, I think I'd echo that of probably the majority of our projects is that I think, and I don't think you have to. I don't think you have to completely leave. I think, you may physically leave an environment or a location, but I think the relationships are ongoing and they should be.
Same.
Retweet. Great. I think people have that fear. Like, if I build a relationship, then what? Then you have a relationship. How wonderful. All right, y'all. I said I'd do it, and here we are. There will be a mic delivered. I see it, but I can also just give you mine.
I wanted to hear more about that dance between the director and the cinematographer, because I feel like with documentary filmmaking, you don't get to hear as much about that, and it's so different than on a scripted set. Especially in this type of a bit of a fly on the wall documentary. I was wondering if you could break that down a little bit more about how you figured out what was the best way to work together and, to direct, but also to trust you and then also create that intimacy at the same time.
Well, it came because we were missing stuff at first. Like, things were happening and you would see it and I wouldn't because I was grabbing something else, and out of frustration. And the fact that, like, for years now I've told Charles I'll shoot anything that he does, if he wants me. So we've developed our working relationship of, like, Charles looking at the monitor, looking at the camera, seeing what I'm doing. And that's a privilege to be in a situation where he can just sort of see where I'm at. And, like, I'd have a little monitor for him so he could just peek over my shoulder. And then at that point, things are moving so fast that he needs to be editing in his head and, like, listening and following the action. Because it is literally, like, there's so many shots in there where if you could see where the clip ended, it's like the camera's moving as soon as it cuts, just because it's quick.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, especially with young folk, too. I mean, they're spry. They're moving around, and we were also in this space. Only those intimate moments. Was like, thank God we're just in a bedroom right now, like with Francine, and we can just focus on a couple of things. But then Mike is like standing over her on the and while she's lying on the bed, and she's still just writing. And we're able to get the lens, and I can say closer or tighter, we can communicate that way. The thing I noticed with Mike, because he's such a perfectionist, is that, he'll get his eye on the lens, and I think this is something that we talked about, is like, cinematographers, when you're shooting out there, is like, it's keeping your eye on the lens there, but it's also keeping another eye going on what's happening in the room, we have to be listening and looking at, we used to say, we got to have eyes on the back of our heads and our ears as well. Because you're listening and you're trying to follow some things, and some things are interesting and you have to go get them. But then when's the right time if you're in a moment? But he's confident to say, Charles, I just haven't finished this last thing, because he's getting something. And I'm like, cool. All right, this is where we're going next. So we're you're actively moving around the room and listening and seeing what's happening. That's what we were doing.
It wasn't easy, for sure.
No.
It was like there's a scene. It's one of my favorite in the movie where they go to the grocery store, and it's like it couldn't be more doc. Like, they don't care what we're doing. Like, they're just gonna go grocery shopping and then leave. So it's up to us to just sit there and just jump around really fast, and that, like, to the point where you were running way ahead and just just a teammate sort of situation.
Anticipating. You gotta, like, when someone walks into a room, what do they gotta get? He said, we gotta go to get these groceries, or the whatever, the sugar or whatever. It's like, where's the sugar? Okay, so you gotta run and go by. And then he does this amazing shot where I don't know how he does it, but he's following there in the thing, and you don't know what someone's gonna do. And then, you know, Dad points to the sugar, and then Francine gets it, and the camera, I still can't understand the shot. I watched it so many times. I don't know how you did this, but it flips around and then it stays where we don't have to cut. And it captures everything. And I was like, man, this guy, I love him, and he's wonderful because he digs into it, he commits to it, and then you know, our framing and stuff, and like those things we've already established them. I already trust his eye. So it's just a matter of the listening, and I think cinematographer is listening, and I'm listening, and then we're both trying to, we're listening and we're looking, and sometimes, you know, it's just, we're lucky too.
And in your prep process, are you having conversations so that you're on the same page about what matters? And like, you know, that's all in prep. So you know what you're looking for.
Each day when we'd get together, we'd drive up to, every time we'd always travel to set together, and we'd have a kind of briefing, like on the way to, before we shoot. These are the kind of ideas we're looking for. This is what we're trying to capture. This is the kind of thing that's happening. And it would usually be a pretty long list of things. It was pretty ambitious. We shot a lot because we wanted to, you know, like, I think one of the early things is like, you know, Villaways community was going to be our set. That's our set. And so, and look at this massive set we have to play with in a way. And hopefully we can get further and further in. And it took a while, like even with Toronto Community Housing, to even get into a unit, to even like, we're restricted that we can only shoot up until I think 10 p.m. or something, 10 p.m. at night.
Restrictions, yeah, we did. Yeah.
We were given restrictions. And then, you know, I won't say it, but we were given restrictions, and we had to, you know, find our way around some of them too, because some things are happening in people's lives that you're like, you want to be available for, but we also know it's a young girl, she should be in bed at a certain time too. so yeah.
I think just to touch on it may segue a bit, but just to that point, because I think it's worth bringing up, because we started this talking about community, and what was really interesting was that when we first went into Villaways and we were working with this community, we had secured permission from the community. The community had said, yes, come on in. And we actually started filming, and I went ahead until I basically got a call from Toronto Community Housing saying, you can't film in this community, you don't have permission from us. And so in terms of the how, that was one of the hoops that we actually did have to go through, and we had to secure permission from Toronto Community Housing, so we had to stand down just for a little bit until we could hammer that out, but we actually had to pay to go into the community and actually to film with, you know, all of our subjects that had actually already said, come on in. So it was actually, that was a learning curve for me. It was something that I didn't anticipate, but we got through it. There were some restrictions that were given to us, but we were able to do what we needed to do.
Because she's such a smooth talker, she's amazing. She's the best. I don't know, I think this project would have been so jeopardized if I was on the phone with any of those folks. It never would have happened.
Yeah, me too.
It wouldn't have happened. But thank you, Lea.
How to literally enter TCH. It's complex. Other questions from our audience? Yeah, in the middle, there's a mic coming your way if you can wait 1 second.
So how long did the production actually take? How many months or weeks?
We shot 23 or 22, 23 days over the course of a year. Yeah, we had to break it up because there also is a feel of it going through seasons. So,
but add to that I think Charles spent almost a year to 18 months just hanging out in the community before we actually brought in a camera. Yeah. So overall, I'd say about 3 years from the beginning conversations until we actually finished the film.
And that kind of early period, is there a guidebook for that? Like, because I think it would benefit people with this desire to know, what does that mean when you're hanging out for a year? Are you setting up, you know, focus group style things where people can choose if they're coming? Are you knocking on doors? What did you do?
The short answer is, aside from Charles literally actually doing some of that, was also partnering with Art Starts in that community. And I think that was really key, was understanding who we could partner with that already had a position in this community, that would also have the community understand who we were and what we were trying to do, but then also I think help to pave the way. And Carlene Robinson was really significant in that, who was at the time the program manager. And so it was about exactly, again, we come back to relationships, building those relationships along the way, right?
And Art Starts has regular arts programming in Villaways, just for folks who might not have heard of them. Do you have other questions? Yeah, in the back. There's a microphone coming.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, how many hours of footage did you have that you had to edit down, and how difficult was that?
You know what the crazy thing is? I actually have no idea. Like when we estimate, like we shoot at an average of an 8-hour day, right?
I remember the size of the...
Because we shot like slow-mo, we shot like
yeah, it was like
in your estimation
600
of like,
gigs a day. So
which
it's
means
like a lot of...
So how much does that roughly come to in time?
Actually, it's probably like
10 out, 12, 10 out
per day.
No, yeah.
No, per day would be like 2 hours.
Really?
3 hours.
That's it?
It's a lot.
I know. I thought we were collecting like almost 3 or 4 hours, like sometimes.
Maybe, I don't know. Actually, it just,
see, I mean, it was confusing some days because it was like so you multiply that. You're probably better in math than me, but so like, yeah, it was a bit of stuff. Like we captured. I don't think it was like excessive, like to the point where we couldn't like, dig things out or see what we were doing. But it was a lot. I think it was probably a decent enough ratio to make an 85-minute film.
We would have just, if we weren't just rolling the whole time though, we would have missed so many little moments.
Yeah.
Like,
because also the programs are designed a certain way. Like it's not like so the Art Starts program. It was like an hour and a bit. Like the actual programs, or we'd go to the programs and be like 3 hours of shooting there. Then we shoot some stuff in a house after at a certain point, or we'd be shooting some exterior stuff, and then we go to. So but that hub of that. There was a whole other the younger youth that were going, not the music, going to. There was a whole other program that we filmed every time we went up, and there was like twice a week, these programs. Anyway, it's hard for me to estimate these.
Yeah, it would be a couple. It'd probably be more than 3 hours. Now that you say that, because each one was an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe like 8 hours of footage.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Like seriously, I think it's almost like in our shooting time, whatever our shooting time was scheduled that day, probably got maybe a half hour less in footage. I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Another question? Yeah, just in the middle.
Hi, I guess my question is, because you're filming a community and that the subject is quite sensitive, you did go through the fact of knowing the community before starting filming, but I'm thinking afterwards, when the film is actually done, how much space do you leave for the community to actually have a word or say about the movie? Like if they turn around and they're like, we don't like that, remove it. How do you deal with that? Did you show the movie to them before? Or?
Great question. So yes, we did screen the film for major subjects, so Francine, Levon, Carlene, we did screen it for everybody before we actually did officially picture lock the film. And it's really hard to see yourself on screen and to hear yourself. And so for Francine, just to be honest, it was difficult for her to actually see herself, but she was confident in Charles. And so her response was more about a very personal response about herself as opposed to a response about the film. But she gave Charles a big stamp of approval after watching it with us and let him know that she was happy for him to move forward with the film. I think we actually do, when we go out with the film, bring a lot of the key subjects and those that were in the actual music program out with us and try to give them the stage and the opportunity to speak as much as they can. I think all of them, I'm speaking on behalf of them right now, would say that they feel the film reflects what they were going through at the time, and that it has had a positive impact. But definitely it was important for them to really be able to tell us how they responded to it before we made any final decisions and locked it.
And would you have changed things if there were parts that made people uncomfortable?
I mean, yes, absolutely, to answer that question. But then we also, in our editing process, there were questions that came up about showing certain things and not. And, you know, we had some screenings where there were discussions about some things were altered and shifted. And because we're trying to actually, we want to be honest, but there's so much stigma attached to this community that we have to be so careful in a way of like perpetuating or like showing a different lens or so and it was amazing to work with Lea on this, you know, so you can see things and understands things, that the nuances of some things, and it's hard to explain that. And sometimes, you know, your intentions of what you may want to impose and get in your own way. So it was really, really good that we were able to look at cuts and actually discuss moments. That, because, you know, I wanted to protect as much as I wanted to expose Francine. We wanted to have there's a young girl, you know, and this, you know, we have if the film was going out in the world, everyone gets to see her in this way and talking to her about, like, okay, people that you don't know in some other part of the world is going to know what your bedroom looks like. What if you're embarrassed about your bedroom? You know, what if you, like, these sort of things, and trying to talk to her about it, and eventually, you know, when they agree and they say yes, okay, then we have to let it go and trust that, but we still have to be sensitive in what they're showing in those spaces, you know. It's a lot. It takes a lot, like a thinking and sensitivity and being aware and being present, and you get tired. So you miss some things, and then you're lucky that you have a team that is also, you know, can point things out, and they got your back, you know. So it's important.
Wonderful. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, we'll take a question in the back.
This was a really intimate piece, clearly, and this is a bizarre question that you could never ask of a scripted filmmaker. But you talked about how you pulled the kids' voices out, or the young people's voices, specifically Francine. Given the quantity of footage, do you think you could ever go back and tell a different story with the same? Not that you would, but it might be an interesting experiment.
I think there are 3 films that we could have made. I think there's other, I don't know in terms of length, but there are other avenues that this thing could have easily have been. Yeah, and with the material that you will all never see, yes, we could definitely go back and, like, cut something that could probably really, really be fun and a different perspective of this experience. A different perspective of this experience, but nonetheless the same experience of where agency lies in communities such as this. You know, where the voices come from, who's making decisions, you know, so it's still the same thing that's going on. Yeah.
I want to see all the films that you want to make. I want to thank you so much for this project. I'm glad I brought you to Villaways, Charles.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful.
I wouldn't have brought everyone up there.
Yeah.
And thank you all for joining us today. Any last bits of wisdom to people who want to make this kind of, a documentary about a community, reveal secrets, nuggets you want to send these fine filmmakers out into the world with? Ask questions.
I think you've asked some of them today. I think some of those questions that you've been asking of us are the questions that filmmakers have to then ask themselves before they, embark on a project like this. So I think you've asked them. So I think they should take that away. And I think we just like to say thank you, Bridget. Thank you for your moderation. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you to Lynn. Thank you to TIFF, Canada's Top 10 Film Festival. This has been a wonderful experience. We're very grateful.
Can folks see the film? Go now.
Yeah, you can see it twice here. Monday at 6 p.m. You can come and see the film, and the youth are going to be here. Like, they're going to be here on Monday and Wednesday, the 18th, right? Shoot. So let me remind you. So the 15th and the 18th, and the 15th at 6 p.m., the 18th at 3:30 p.m. Okay, so I got that. That's all I'll say. So please come, and if you want to spread the word, yeah. Please come.
Please come. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you.